For the past month or so, something slightly unexpected has happened. I haven't really touched my MacBook Pro. It's not broken, I haven't sold it, and I haven't suddenly decided that macOS is terrible. It's still sitting there ready to use. I just haven't felt the need to use it. Instead, I've been reaching for this. 16-inch ASUS Zenbook A16 with the Snapdragon X2 Elite chip. Bit of a mouthful. And no, unfortunately, mine isn't blue. Now, color aside, this might be the first Windows laptop I've used in a long time that genuinely feels capable of replacing my MacBook rather than simply sitting next to it. That distinction kind of matters because in the past, Windows laptops have been powerful enough. Others have had good battery life. Some have been light and thin. The problem's always been getting all of those things in the same machine without accepting one compromise that eventually pushes me back to the MacBook. I thought the Snapdragon X Elite generation might solve that problem. It didn't. Well, at least not completely. So the question I wanted to answer with this laptop was quite simple. Has Windows on Snapdragon finally reached the point where I can use it as my main computer without constantly thinking about what might not work? After around a month or so with the Zenbook A16, I think we're much closer than we were before. Although there's still a few things you should know about before spending your money. Let's get into it. I've always liked Windows. It's the operating system I've used for most of my life. And in many ways, it still feels more familiar to me. I like being able to use the same computer for work, editing, and occasionally opening Steam. Don't judge me. Then, Apple released the M series MacBooks. That changed things for me. Suddenly, I could have strong performance for editing, very good battery life, and a laptop that didn't feel like it was constantly fighting against itself. So even though I've always enjoyed Windows, I switched to the MacBook, and I stayed, because it worked. When the first Snapdragon X Elite laptops arrived, I thought Windows might finally have an answer. I even tried one of the Microsoft Surface's laptop with the X Elite chip. I was just so excited because it looked so good. And it's not because it was, okay, maybe some of it was because it was blue. But back to it. The hardware made a lot of sense. The battery life was promising. The laptop was portable. Normal everyday tasks generally felt good. The problem was though, compatibility. That's where I struggled with the earlier X Elite machine. Some things worked. Some things worked through emulation. Some things didn't work properly at all. And even when most of your software is fine, it only takes one important application or one game you regularly play to create doubt. That experience made me more cautious about the Zenbook A16. I wanted it to work so much, I just wasn't convinced that a newer Snapdragon chip would automatically solve the problems I'd already faced. The first thing that won me over wasn't the processor, surprisingly. It was the size and weight. This is a 16-inch laptop, and I really enjoy working on a large display. It's not because I'm getting old. For editing, having more space makes a real difference. You can see more of your timeline, your preview window doesn't feel cramped, and you're not constantly rearranging everything just to make it fit. The extra screen real estate also makes a big difference for general productivity. Using split screen feels genuinely useful rather than like you're squeezing two windows into a space that's too small. I can have a document open on one side, research and notes open on the other side. It just feels comfortable to use. It gives everything more room to breathe, and once you get used to working that way, going back to say a 13 or 14-inch screen can feel surprisingly restrictive. Another problem with larger laptops is that you normally feel it in your backpack. My 16-inch MacBook Pro is an excellent machine, but when it's in my bag, I know it's in my bag. Add the charger, camera, a few accessories, and whatever else I like to carry that I probably shouldn't, and the weight starts to build very, very quickly. Now, you might be thinking, why not just get the 15-inch MacBook Air? And I think that's a fair question. The MacBook Air is lighter than the MacBook Pro and gives you a large display. For me though, this simply wasn't about finding a lighter MacBook. I wanted to get back to Windows without giving up the things I've become used to, like strong battery life, a thin portable design. The Zenbook also gives me a 16-inch OLED display with 120Hz refresh rates, along with a wider selection of ports. Okay, I'm not going to turn this into like a whole MacBook Air comparison because that's not really the point of this video. But those differences do make it feel like a more flexible machine for the way I use a laptop. Most importantly, it gives me the screen size I want without making my backpack feel unnecessarily heavy. Because it's easy to carry, I don't have to decide whether I really need the larger computer that day. I can take the larger screen without feeling as though I'm being punished for it. So this was the initial reason why I kept reaching for the Zenbook. Then, the battery life started changing how I used it. Battery life was one of the main reasons I moved to the MacBook in the first place, and I think a lot of people did as well. Before the M series, I'd become used to treating Windows laptop battery estimates with a certain amount of caution. You'd see impressive numbers on the box, you start doing some real work, and then watch the battery disappear. I remember when I had the MacBook M1 Pro, I stopped thinking about battery life so much. That freedom is difficult to give up once you experienced it. So for the Zenbook to replace my MacBook, good battery life wasn't an optional bonus, it was essential. And so far, the battery life has been one of the strongest parts of the experience. In real world use, I'm getting roughly 15 to 18 hours of general productivity, obviously depending on how heavily I'm using it. That can work out to a couple of days or working days before I need to charge it. Obviously, video editing, gaming, and other demanding tasks is going to reduce that. But I'm just saying, if you're going to be browsing, writing, doing emails, split screen work, research, all that normal productivity stuff, it's actually really good. More importantly, I'm not constantly checking the battery percentage or carrying the charger because I'm worried it's not going to make it through the day. Now that's not going to sound exciting to a lot of you, but it changes the relationship you have with this portable computer. You're more likely to take it away from the desk, and you don't feel as though choosing Windows automatically means accepting more battery anxiety. I've been using the Zenbook as my normal laptop, my daily driver, and the battery hasn't made me want to return to the MacBook Pro. I mean, that's a really expensive machine, right? It shouldn't just be sitting there. That's probably the most important compliment I can give it. Power's there, the battery life's there, and neither feels like it's been added at the expense of the other. Okay, so at this point, the hardware mostly won me over. Software compatibility though, was still the bigger question. For my daily use, performance isn't just about opening applications quickly. I film and edit videos, so I need a laptop that stays responsive when I'm actually working. This model has 48 gigs of RAM, that's right, 48 gigs, 1 terabyte storage, which gives me plenty of headroom for editing, multitasking, and keeping several applications open without constantly the computer slowing down. Combined with the larger display, it makes the Zenbook feel like a proper work machine, rather than just a thin laptop that happens to have a big screen. The MacBook became my main computer because it gave me strong editing performance without needing to be permanently attached to the charger. The Zenbook A16 is one of the first Windows laptops I've used that gives me a similar sense of freedom. And I guess the funniest thing is, I've had the MacBook Pro obviously available to me for the past month or so. I'm not forcing myself to use this every day, I just happen to be reaching for it every day. That's something quite new and exciting in the Windows world, which we haven't had for a while, I think. There is, however, another reason this laptop has worked better for me than my previous Snapdragon machine. Gaming. Gaming was one of the biggest frustrations with the earlier Snapdragon X Elite generation, and before, I guess. Windows might be working well, the laptop might be fast, the battery might be excellent. Then you open up Steam and discover that the game you wanted to play doesn't run as well or has compatibility issues. Now, to be fair, I've had a similar frustration on the Mac. I built up a fairly large Steam library over the years. You know, the ones that come on sale and then you just don't play for some reason because you don't have the time, but you buy it anyway because it's on sale. The problem is that a lot of that library simply doesn't carry over properly to the Mac OS, and people who use Steam and Mac will know this as well. So one reason I've always wanted Windows back as my main laptop is that my existing Steam library actually feels useful again. Now, with the earlier Snapdragon X Elite machines, compatibility still got in the way. With the X2 Elite, more of those games are now working, and that makes this feel much closer to the Windows laptop I originally wanted. Being able to open Steam and play some of the games you already own, I think is part of the appeal for me. With the Snapdragon X2 Elite generation, the list of compatible games has become stronger and longer. That doesn't mean every Steam game is suddenly going to work perfectly. You still need to check the games that matter to you, particularly before buying the laptop. But the important change is that gaming no longer feels like something I have to dismiss immediately. Sometimes I like to have a cheeky session of Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, and I tried so many ways to get it working on the MacBook just over the last however long M series have been around. But with this, I can just open Steam and jump into a game, and I don't need to wonder whether it's going to run or not, because it does run now. And I think that's what replacing a MacBook really comes down to. It isn't about winning one huge comparison. It's just about removing those small compromises that stop you feeling the need to return to the other machine. And I think this is a big step forward. I mean, it's not perfect. So before you spend the money, you should probably check your essential software and favorite games actually works on this laptop. But from my experience, compatibility is much better than it used to be, and I don't have to constantly think about it. The keyboard has been another highlight. It's generally a joy to type on. That matters to a lot of people, including me, because a lot of my time on a laptop isn't doing something that's visually exciting, right? It's emails, notes, planning videos, scripts, research, making changes to projects. A keyboard can look perfectly fine in photographs and still become tiring once you start typing on it for a while. This one though, feels comfortable and isn't too loud and gives you that satisfying clicky clacky sound. I mean, I don't know if that's a technical term, but that's what I'm calling it. It's one of those parts of the laptop that you don't actually have to think about, which is exactly what you want from a keyboard. And it's backlit as well, by the way. The trackpad is large and solid, but you can't really press down on it mechanically for the top 20%. I mean, you can still tap on it, but it doesn't push down like the MacBook does, which is haptic. I guess Apple have been spoiling us with the haptic trackpads for the past few years, so that's just something I just expected to be able to do. But it's there, and I know it's probably nitpicky, but I think it's something that you should know. For me though, I stopped noticing it after the first couple of days, to be honest, and it's not bothered me as much as I thought it would. And normally I'm quite OCD about these things. The strongest thing about the Zenbook A16 isn't one individual feature, it's the combination. I get the large 16-inch screen I enjoy using for editing and normal work. I get a laptop that doesn't make my backpack feel unnecessarily heavy. I get the battery life that originally attracted me to the M series MacBooks. And I get the familiarity and flexibility of Windows. And with the Snapdragon X2 Elite generation, I'm seeing much better compatibility with Steam as well as apps that weren't previously there. Now, none of those things alone would necessarily make me put the MacBook aside, but together they have. So, has the ASUS Zenbook A16 replaced my MacBook? For the past month or so? Yes, it has. And that's what surprised me the most. I didn't make a formal decision to stop using the MacBook. It's just been my go-to for like so many years, 5 generations or so. I just stopped reaching for it. The Zenbook gave me the large screen I wanted, power, battery life, and it didn't feel like a step backwards. So what I'm trying to say is that this is the first Snapdragon Windows laptop I've used where the benefits have become more noticeable than the compromises. And for me, that might finally be enough. Let me know in the comments below whether you'd consider replacing your MacBook with a Snapdragon Windows laptop, and which applications or games you need to know were compatible before making that decision. Thanks so much for watching. I've really enjoyed making this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching it. I'm Maz, and this is Maz Tech Central, where I like to keep tech simple and accessible for everyone. Take care guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye now.